Standard 9, Social Science, History, Unit 7, State and Society in Medieval India, from the Cholas to the Mughals. Learning objectives, to acquire knowledge of 1. Successive dynasties and the resultant political outcomes from the times of the Cholas to the Mughals. 2. Influence of Islam and Islamic State on the socio-cultural life of the people. 3. Institutional and administrative changes during Chola, Pandya and Vijayanagara periods in the south. 4. Development of literature, art and architecture. 5. Transformation in agriculture and manufacturing sector. 6. Progress in maritime trade, commerce and urbanization. Heading: Introduction. The medieval period from the 7th century AD, CE, till the beginning of Mughal rule in the 16th century. The Mughal era, from the 16th to 18th century, is referred to as the early modern period. The political scenario in all parts of India underwent momentous, definitive changes which transformed the social and economic fabric and development of the country. Heading: Major political changes. 1. The expansion of the Chola Empire from the time of Rajaraja I, which eclipsed the Pandyang and Pallava kingdoms, extending north till Orissa. 2. From the 12th century, the beginning of several centuries of Muslim rule in Delhi, extending throughout North India, and the spread of Islam to different parts of the country. 3. By the end of the 13th century, the eclipse of the great empire of the Cholas and the consequent rise of many religious kingdoms in South India. This ultimately culminated in the rise of the Vijayanagar Empire, which exercised authority over all of South India and came to be considered the bastion of religious rule in the south. 4. The consolidation of Muslim rule under the Mughals in the north, beginning in 1526 AD CE, with the defeat of the Ibrahim Lodi by Babur. At its height, the Mughal Empire stretched from Kabul to Gujarat to Bengal, from Kashmir to South India. 5. The coming of the Europeans, beginning with the Portuguese who arrived on the west coast of India in 1498. Topic: Political changes, 1000 to 1700. Subtopic: North India, the advent of Islam. Muslim rule was established in Delhi at the end of the 12th century by Muhammad Ghori. Arab Muslim merchants had been trading in the ports of the west coast, especially Kerala, as early as the 9th century. Similarly, Muslim invaders from West Asia had set up sultanates in Gujarat and Sindh since the 8th century. The impact of Muslim rule was felt during the reign of Alauddin Khilji, 1296 to 1316 AD CE, who sent military campaigns to the south. The primary objective was to plunder the wealth, rather than to expand his territory. There is a picture of the map of important places of India in the late 14th and 15th centuries. Devagiri, near Aurangabad, was captured by Alauddin Khilji, renamed Daulatabad. It was the second stronghold of his growing kingdom. Alauddin Khilji's slave and commander, Malik Kafur, was sent on military expeditions further south in the first decade of the 1300s AD CE. The Tughlaq kings who came after Alauddin also sent their armies to the south. As a result, the generally more isolated southern part of the country came into the orbit of the rulers of the north. Governors were appointed in various provinces in the Deccan region, and a sultanate was even established in Madurai. During the reign of Muhammad bin Tughlaq, there was a revolt in Daulatabad. Alauddin Bahman Shah set up the Bahmani Sultanate in 1347 AD CE, with his capital in Bidar. The Bahmani kingdom survived for nearly a century and a half, mainly due to the able administration of Mahmud Gawan, a great statesman and loyal minister. After his death, many viceroys declared their independence, and by the end of the 15th century, 5 sultanates came up in the Deccan: Bijapur, Golconda, Ahmednagar, Berar, and Bidar. Bijapur and Golconda were the largest of these sultanates, and the region entered a phase of considerable economic growth and expansion of trade. The Deccan sultanates were conquered by Aurangzeb in the 1660s AD CE, and the entire region, as far south as Madras, Chennai, became a part of the Mughal Empire. There is a picture of Muhammad bin Tughlaq. Subtopic: The Chola Empire in the south. The territorial expansion of the Chola Empire began under Rajaraja I. The Pallava kingdom had already been assimilated into the Chola kingdom. The Pandya kingdom remained independent, but was subservient to the Cholas. The empire expanded further under Rajendra I, who had successfully taken his armies as far to the northeast as the river Ganges. He had also sent naval expeditions against the Shailendra kingdom of Sri Vijaya, in Indonesia, Kadaram, Kada, and Ceylon. This earned him the title, the Chola who had conquered the Ganga and Kadaram, Gangayam Kadaramam Konda Cholan. Ceylon remained a province of the Chola Empire for a few decades. The empire was further consolidated through marriage with the eastern Chalukyas under Rajendra's grandson Kulatunga I, and extended up to the border of Orissa. Maritime trade with Southeast Asia and China expanded greatly during the Chola period. The continued interaction with Tamil merchants resulted in the spread of the influence of Indic culture and art into Southeast Asia, as seen in the magnificent temples of Angkor Wat in Cambodia. There is a picture of King Raja Chola I, subtopic, Vijayanagar and South India after the Cholas. The Chola Empire began to decline after the middle of the 13th century. The last known Chola emperor was Rajendra III. The empire died out in 1279 AD, CE. Several power centers came up after this in the region. Further to the south, the Pandya kings again sought to regain the glory they had lost under the Cholas. Many brilliant Pandya kings like Jatavaman Sundara Pandyam ruled at the end of the 13th century. Further to the north was the Hoysala kingdom, with its capital at Belur and later Halebidu. This kingdom extended through much of the present-day state of Karnataka. The Kakatiyas ruled from Warangal, Telangana, while the Yadavas ruled in Devagiri until Devagiri fell to Alauddin Khalji's forces at the end of the 13th century. These states did not exist in peaceful cooperation, and the region was beset by many internal wars and conflicts. The establishment of the kingdom, subsequently empire, of Vijayanagar was the most momentous development in the history of South India in the medieval period. The kingdom was established by Harihara and Bukka, two brothers. They were the first rulers of the Sandma dynasty. They founded a new capital city on the southern banks of Tungabhadra which they named Vijayanagara, City of Victory. Harihara was crowned in 1336 AD, CE. The Sandma dynasty ruled Vijayanagar for nearly 1.5 centuries. This was followed by the Sluva dynasty which was in power only for a brief period. The Tuluva dynasty then succeeded as rulers. Krishnadev Raya, the greatest ruler of Vijayanagar, belonged to this family. Kingdom, a country ruled by a king or queen. Empire, a group of countries controlled by one ruler, an emperor. As the empire expanded, kingdoms to the south, such as the Hoysalas and the Tamil region, were also assimilated into Vijayanagar. The rulers of Vijayanagar were almost continuously at war with the Bahmani Sultanate as well as with the Religious-based kingdoms of Kondavidu and Orissa. Finally, the combined forces of the 5 Deccani Sultanates defeated Vijayanagar in 1565 AD, CE, at the Battle of Talikota. The Vijayanagar emperors then shifted their capital further south to Panugonda, and eventually to Chandragiri near Tirupati. The empire, or what remained of it, finally withered away in the middle of the 17th century. Subtopic: The Mughals, 1526 to 1707 AD, CE. The Mughal Empire was founded by Babur in 1526 AD, CE, after he defeated Ibrahim Lodi at Panipat. The first 6 Mughal emperors are referred to as the Great Mughals. Aurangzeb was the last of the Great Mughals. Akbar consolidated the Mughal Empire through conquests and through a policy of conciliation with the religious-based kingdoms of Rajasthan. The Mughal Empire, though began to disintegrate after Aurangzeb, continued to exist nominally till 1857 AD, CE, when the British finally ended the virtually non-existent empire. A new power center rose in Maharashtra in the 17th century, and the Marathas under the leadership of Shivaji seriously undermined the authority of the Mughals in western India. At its height, the empire stretched over most of the Indian subcontinent. Only the southwestern region of Kerala and southern Tamil Nadu were not directly under Mughal rule. Subtopic: The arrival of the Europeans. During the 15th century, the Europeans were preoccupied with trying to find a direct sea route to India, bypassing the overland route through West Asia and the Mediterranean. The spice trade from India was controlled by Muslims up to Alexandria. By gaining direct access to India, the Europeans could exercise more direct control over the spice trade and obtain the spices at more favorable prices. In 1498 AD CE, Vasco da Gama landed on the Kerala coast, having sailed around the Cape of Good Hope in South Africa. Barely 5 years later, the Portuguese built their first fort at Kochi in 1503 AD CE. Goa was captured in 1510 AD CE and became the center of the Portuguese state in India. Because of their naval superiority, the Portuguese were able to conquer many ports from East Africa up to Malacca, and could effectively control the maritime trade over the entire region. There is a picture of trade in Masulipatinam. Other European nations soon followed the Portuguese, most notably the Dutch, English and French. The activities of the latter were carried on through the respective East India companies. While these were all private trading enterprises, they all had a strong political agenda. During the 17th century, when Mughal authority was still powerful, the European companies were able to trade in the Mughal Empire, but could not have their own territorial base within the boundaries of the empire. In South India, however, political authority was fragmented and much less cohesive, and they had their own enclaves over which they exercised complete authority. The Dutch were in Pulicat, and later Nagpatnam, the English in Madras, the French in Pondicherry and the Danes in Tharingampadi, Tranquebar. Topic: Impact on polity. In Indian history had far-reaching consequences on administrative institutions, society and the economy across the sub-continent. The Chola period was an enterprising period when trade and the economy expanded, accompanied by urbanization. The administrative machinery was reorganized during Chola rule. The basic unit of local administration was the village, Ur, followed by the sub-region, Nadu, and district, Kottam. Tax-free villages granted to Brahmins were known as Brahmadeya. Marketing centers and towns were known as Nagaram. The Ur, Nadu, Brahmadeya and Nagaram each had its own assembly. They were responsible for the maintenance and management of the water resources and land, the local temples, resolving local issues and disputes, and for collecting the taxes due to the government. The Cholas' notable feature was the great increase in the construction of temples. This had two dimensions. New temples were constructed, and existing temples became multifunctional social and economic institutions. The construction of great temples also was a reflection of the growing prosperity in the kingdom, since the activity involved great expenditure. The temple was no longer a mere place of worship, but became an important economic entity as an employer, consumer and landowner. The establishment of Islamic rule in Delhi made a big impact on Indian society. Initially, Islam did not cause any social tension. Arab merchants, for instance, when they came and settled on Kerala coast, married local women and led a peaceful life. The situation changed when Islam became a state power. For a medieval ruler, one way of asserting imperial authority was to demolish the place of worship of the enemies. Otherwise, Islam as a monotheistic religion had its positive impact in Indian society. It played a decisive role in the evolution of a composite culture. Muslim kingdoms in Delhi, as well in the Deccan, also attracted migrants from Persia and Arabia who moved to India and took up service in these states, and many became important and well-known statesmen. This also opened up Indian society to steady interaction with West Asia, resulting in the transfer of cultural and technical influences. Muslim merchants and craftsmen also migrated from the north of India to the south in the wake of the military expeditions. Society became more heterogeneous and hybrid in character. A new composite culture evolved. This could be seen most vividly in the Deccan Sultanates of Bijapur and Golconda, whose rulers were extremely broad-minded and secular in outlook. A notable development was the profusion of contemporary historical accounts of the Muslim sultanates by Arab and Persian historians. Al-Biruni, Ibn Battuta, and Ferista are among the best known of the Muslim historians. These historians provide valuable information about the rulers and events of the medieval period. They also provide an alternate historical point of view of Islamic rule in India as seen through the eyes of Muslim writers. The establishment of the Vijayanagar Empire changed the administrative and social institutional structure of South India, especially in the Tamil country. Perhaps because the new kingdom was threatened from the beginning by the hostility of the Bahmani Sultanate in the north, Vijayanagar evolved as a militaristic state. This empire needed two kinds of resources to feed its military establishment, revenue and men. This was achieved through reorganizing the administration of the conquered territories, especially in the Tamil region. Military officers, known as Naika, were appointed as chiefs of various localities in Tamilnadu and received land grants from the emperor. There were also lesser military leaders known as Palayakarar who essentially supplied the manpower for the army. Many forts were also built which were under Brahman commanders. Three major Naika kingdoms, owing allegiance to the Vijayanagar emperor, came up between 1500 AD CE and 1550 AD CE in Madurai, Tanjavur and Jinji, Senji. These Naika had formal roles in court ceremonials at Vijayanagar. This became the new political order in Tamil Nadu during the 16th century. The Naika chieftains as well as the three Naika kings were all strong supporters of Hindu temples. The three capitals became great cultural centers under the patronage of the Naika rulers who promoted literature and the performing arts. Resources realized from the land were transferred to the empire by the Naika not as tax revenue, but as tribute. Thus, the resources of the core regions, especially in the Tamil region, were utilized for military purposes. This administrative setup effectively destroyed the decentralized, local institutions which managed local resources, temples and affairs which had come up during Chola rule. The appointment of Telugu Naika also resulted in the migration of Telugu-speaking people from the north. These included soldiers, agriculturists, craftsmen and Brahmins. The Mughal Empire transformed the economy and society of North India. The empire was consolidated under Akbar through his policy of co-opting the Hindu Rajput rulers under the umbrella of Mughal rule. At the height of its power, the Mughal Empire was one of the largest, richest and most powerful empire in the entire world. In part due to Aurangzeb's reversal to orthodox Islamic principles of governance which alienated the Rajput rulers and the Hindu subjects, the overextended empire began to collapse under its own weight by the beginning of the 18th century. The arrival of the Europeans in India ultimately culminated in the establishment of colonial rule in India under the British, and this is what is considered foremost when discussing the impact of the European presence. There was an explosion in the demand for Indian textiles in the European markets, often referred to as the Indian craze. This led to a significant expansion of textile production in India, which was accompanied by an expansion of the production of commercial crops like cotton and indigo and other dyes. Topic: Society. Subtopic: Caste. Caste is the most distinctive aspect of Indian society. We first need to understand two dimensions of the term caste. First, the fourfold division of society as specified in the religious texts, referred to as Varna. Improving the status of their jati was a major preoccupation for all caste groups. This is particularly evident after the 14th century when the traditional local assemblies which controlled the resources and social interactions began to weaken. In traditional society, many castes were denied various social rights and privileges. Caste also created a mythical genealogy to establish its origins. This was used to justify the claim for the right to a higher status in the hierarchy. These genealogies are found in many of the manuscripts collected by Colin Mackenzie. Subtopic: Religion. Diverse institutions with different ideologies came up within the Bhakti movement during the medieval period. Mathas or mats were established under different gurus or religious leaders like Vidyaranya. Saivite movements came up like the Tamil Seva, Siddhartha, and the Virasevas in Karnataka. In Maharashtra, the Varkari Sampradaya, tradition, of the devotees of Vithoba arose in the 14th century. Buddhism had faded out in India. Jainism also lost ground in most parts of India due to emergence of Bhakti movement under Sankara and Ramanuja. However, it continued to thrive in parts of Gujarat and Marwar, especially among the trading communities. With regard to Christianity, there were a small number of Christian groups in Kerala claiming their origins to the time of Saint Thomas, the disciple of Jesus. But Christianity took roots when the Portuguese arrived in Kerala and set themselves up in Goa. In Goa itself, the local population was under great pressure to convert to Christianity. Among the fishing communities on the Pandyam coast, The best known among the Jesuit missionaries was Saint Francis Xavier, who was instrumental in making the fishing community to take to Christianity in the Tuticorin region. Another notable Jesuit was Roberto the Nobile, a scholar, who was based in Madurai. There is a picture of Roberto the Nobile. In the north, a new religion, Sikhism, was founded by Guru Nanak, who lived during 15th and 16th century. Sikhism grew in strength in spite of severe repression by Aurangzeb. Foreign religions also came to India when Jews and Zoroastrians, Parsis, migrated to India. The Parsis, who fled Persia to escape persecution, settled in Gujarat, while the Jews lived in Kerala. Parsi merchants were among the richest and most prominent in the port of Surat, and subsequently, in Bombay under the British. Topic: Culture. Heading: Literature, Art and Architecture. The Chola period was an era of remarkable cultural activity. These were the centuries when major literary works were written. The best-known classical poet, Kamban, wrote Ramayana in Tamil, which was formally presented, Arangetram, in the temple at Srirangam. Sekula's Periyapuranam, similarly, was presented at the temple in Chidambaram. Among the other great works of the period is Kalingattu Parani and Muvarula. The monumental architecture of the Cholas is visible in the great temple of Tanjavur, Gangekonda Cholapuram and Darasuram, to name only a few. Stone images were sculpted on the temple walls and pillars. Bronze images of great beauty and artistry were made by the lost wax process. The best known of them is the iconic representation of Shiva as Nataraj, performing the cosmic dance. A distinct Islamic cultural tradition developed in India with the establishment of Muslim rule. The sultans built forts, tombs, mosques and other monuments in Delhi as well as in South India, which came under their rule. The Mughal period particularly was a brilliant epoch in the cultural history of India. The Mughals were well known for their aesthetic values, and were great patrons of the arts. They left behind numerous monuments, in addition to constructing entire cities like Shahjahanabad, Delhi, and Fatehpur Sikari, gardens, mosques and forts. Decorative arts, especially jewelry set with precious and semi-precious gems for items of personal use, flourished under the patronage of the royal household and urban elites. The art of painting also flourished in the Mughal period. Primarily known as Mughal miniatures, they were generally intended as book illustrations or were single works to be kept in albums. A large volume of literature was produced, especially in Persian, and also in Urdu, Hindi and other regional languages. In the performing arts, like Hindustani, the name of Tansen is well known, indicating the patronage extended to classical music under Akbar. There is a picture of Fatehpur Sikari Fort. In South India, the Vijayanagar rulers and their military chiefs actively supported temple construction. Many new temples were built by them. Besides this, new structures like pavilions and halls with many pillars were added extensively to existing temples, with elaborately carved pillars. Art historians point to the distinctive style of the temple sculptures of the Vijayanagar period. The intricately carved lofty towers or gopurams at the entrance to temples were all added during the Vijayanagar period. The walls of the temples were embellished with paintings. There is a picture of Hampi. A large volume of religious literature, especially in Sanskrit, was produced under the patronage of the Naikar and the Vijayanagar rulers. Telugu literature flourished under royal support. A new style of Tamil literature called Prabandham emerged during this period. The great commentaries of the epic Silappatikaram and Tirukural were also written during this period. Venkatamaki, son of Govinda Dikshada, who codifying the ragas of Carnatic music, had lived in this period. Topic: Economy. Subtopic: Agriculture. India was predominantly an agricultural country, and a very large proportion of the population lived in rural areas and depended on agriculture for their livelihood. Both in the north and the south, agriculture depended heavily on irrigation. Canals and wells added to the water sources in addition to rainfall and rivers. The biggest network of canals known in India was built in 14th century by Firuz Shah Tughlaq in the Delhi area. Construction of lakes, tanks and reservoirs with sluices to let out the water as well as the use of check dams all increased the availability of water for irrigation. Cultivators were also encouraged to dig wells. Lift irrigation was used to draw the water. In the north, The Persian wheel was used for lifting water from wells. In the Tamil region, the Cholas had created a network of canals for irrigation connecting the tributaries of Kaveri. Lakes and tanks also added to the water sources. There is a picture of Persian wheel. An important feature of Indian agriculture was the large number of crops that were cultivated. The peasant in India was more knowledgeable about many crops as compared to peasants in most of the world at the time. A variety of food grains like wheat, rice, and millets were grown apart from lentils and oilseeds. Many other commercial crops were also grown such as sugarcane, cotton and indigo. Other than the general food crops, South India had a regional specialization in pepper, cinnamon, spices and coconut. In general, two different crops were grown in the different seasons, which protected the productivity of the soil. Maize and tobacco were two new crops which were introduced after the arrival of the Europeans. Many new varieties of fruit or horticultural crops like papaya, pineapple, guava and cashew nut were also introduced which came from the West, especially America. Potatoes, chilies and tomatoes also became an integral part of Indian food. Subtopic: Non-agricultural production. Up to the end of the 17th century, India was one of the largest manufacturing countries in the world, though the economy was primarily agricultural. Non-agricultural production refers to both processed agricultural products and craft production. Primarily the products can be grouped under processed agricultural products like sugar, oil, textiles, metal work, precious gems and jewelry, shipbuilding, ornamental wood and leather work, and many other minor products. The organization of production basically depended on the nature of the market for which it was produced. A large part of the production was intended for local use in the village, or at most a rural region. These goods were basic utilitarian goods like pots and pans, implements like plows, basic woodwork and coarse textiles. Generally the producer marketed the product himself, and exchange was probably conducted on barter. In economic terms, what was important was specialized production by skilled craftsmen for an external market, especially in demand among the high-income rural and urban upper classes. Such craft production was generally located in cities, or in rural settlements close to the cities. Craftsmen generally worked on an individual or family basis from their homes or workshops, though larger manufacturing units, karkhanas, employing many craftsmen were set up under the Mughal state. Subtopic: Textiles. Nearly all the cloth that was produced was of cotton, though silk weaving had developed in Bengal where silk was produced, and in Gujarat. Each region of India produced a range of highly specialized local varieties of cotton cloth ranging from the coarse to the superfine, but all were intended for an external market. Dyed and printed, patterned cloth involved the use of vegetable dyes. India had two natural advantages in cotton weaving. The first was that cotton grew in almost all parts of India, so that the basic raw material was easily available. Second, the technology of producing a permanent color on cotton using vegetable dyes was known from very early times in India. Cotton does not absorb dyes without a preparatory process using mordants, which was not known in the rest of the world. Indigo was the most important dye crop that was grown in India, but other dye crops, like the che root for red color, were also grown in India. Dye woods and resins like lac were imported. In addition, a range of colors were produced by using flowers and fruits, and products like turmeric in various combinations. There is a picture of textile production. Subtopic: Commerce. The large manufacturing sector essentially produced goods for exchange, and not for self-use. Therefore, India had an extensive network of trade for marketing these goods. The village was the basic geographical unit of production, and was essentially a subsistence economy, and barter was the medium of exchange. Big cities were usually major commercial centers, with bazaars and shops. They were also intermediate points in inter-regional trade since they were connected by a network of roads to other centers in other parts of the country. In addition to such overland trade, smaller ships and boats were used in coastal trade along both the western and eastern coasts of the country. Finally, the major ports, Surat, Masulipatam, Calicut etc., were the nodal points in international, maritime trade. Maritime trade across the Indian Ocean, extending from China in the east to Africa in the west, had flourished for many centuries. Thus, ports like Malacca, Calicut etc. were entreports or intermediate points in this regionally segmented trade. In the 17th century, Surat in Gujarat, Masulipatam in the Golconda Kingdom, Chittagong in Bengal, Pulicat, Patavarkadu, and Nagapatnam on the Coromandel coast, and Calicut in Kerala were all major ports in Asiatic trade. India was also a major exporter of textiles, pepper, precious and semi-precious gems, especially diamonds which were then found only in India, and iron and steel which were greatly in demand in the entire Asian region. Textiles accounted for nearly 90% of the total exports from India. The major imports from China and the East were silk, Chinese ceramics, gold, spices, aromatic woods and camphor, silk, drugs, dye woods and sugar were the main imports from Persia, while gold, ivory and slaves were brought in from East Africa. Subtopic: Urbanization. Travelers coming to India in the medieval period noted that there were a number of urban centers of various sizes, from cities to small market towns throughout India. Though the country was primarily rural, the urban population was probably quite small as a proportion of the total, but it had an economic and cultural significance which was much greater than its actual size. What were the factors which facilitated urbanization? It has been observed that cities and towns fulfilled diverse and overlapping roles in the economy. The large cities were centers of manufacturing and marketing, banking and financial services. They were usually located at the intersection of an extensive network of roads. In South India, especially the Tamil region, urbanization went hand in hand with temples. Temples were large economic enterprises requiring a variety of goods and services to function. They needed and employed a large number of people to man the religious services, the kitchens and for other work. Devotees coming to worship at the temple needed many services and goods, so that temple towns also became marketing centers. Heading: Conclusion. The medieval period, covering more than 700 years of Indian history, was a time when momentous changes took place in the political landscape which also transformed the social and economic fabric of the country. Topic: Events happening in Europe during this period. Heading: Holy Roman Empire and Emperor Charlemagne. In the beginning of the 9th century AD CE, a new institution called Holy Roman Empire came into existence in continental Europe. This had nothing to do with the old Roman Empire which had ceased to exist after 476 AD CE. The newly established Holy Roman Empire represented Christianity and Christendom and, hence, it was designated holy. The emperor was supposed to be a representative of God on earth like the Pope. The emperor dealt with political matters, while the Pope dealt with the spiritual. The emperor was superior to everybody else in the world, except the Pope. Charlemagne, the king of Franks, was the first Holy Roman Emperor to assume the title. 800 AD CE. Charlemagne was a contemporary of Pallava king Nandivarman II and Pratihara ruler Nagabhatta I. There is a picture of Charlemagne and Pope Adrian I. Heading: King John and the Great Magna Carta. The nobles in England forced King John II to sign a Charter of Liberty in 1215 AD CE. It is Magna Carta or the Great Charter. This charter contained a promise that the king would respect certain liberties of the nobles and the people of England. The theory of the supremacy of the ruler which prevailed in the Holy Roman Empire was not accepted in England. King John of England was a contemporary of Sultan Iltutmish in India. Thus, in England, we find that the king's power was checked early. There is a picture of King John signing Magna Carta. Recap: 1. Major political changes commencing from the establishment of Muslim rule in Delhi are dealt with. 2. The enterprising period of Cholas and the significance of Vijayanagar Empire in the south are analyzed. 3. The economy and the society during the Sultanate and the Mughal rule are highlighted. 4. Progress in art, literature and music are discussed. 5. Conditions of agriculture, trade, commerce and urbanization are examined.